Hey, Mr. Estrada here, and our learning target is there. We're going to be talking about perpendicular bisectors today. So let's get right to it. I got two definitions for you, and here is the first one. Definition of a segment bisector. A bisector is a line or a segment that divides or splits a segment into two equal segments. A segment bisector intersects the segment at its midpoint. So I have a little diagram here for you. In this diagram, line L is the bisector or the segment bisector of AB. And what that means is that it's crossing AB at the midpoint. So we can also say that the two segments AM and MB are equal in length. And we can say that because that's what a bisector does. It cuts or splits or divides a segment into two equal parts. So AM is equal to MB. So that's the definition of a segment bisector, right? It's just basically a line or a segment that cuts another segment into two equal segments. And the takeaway from here is that the segment bisector always intersects the segment at its midpoint. Okay, make sure you remember that. That's going to come in handy later. Now, a perpendicular bisector. So it's like a segment. It is a segment bisector, but it does something else as well. So a perpendicular bisector is a segment that divides or splits a segment into two equal segments and is perpendicular to the segment. So it's like a segment bisector because it splits the segment into two equal parts. So here AM is also equal to MB. But what it also does is that it is perpendicular to the given segment. So that's why you see a 90-degree angle here. So it does two things. It splits the segment into two equal segments and it's perpendicular to the segment. So L here is the perpendicular bisector. All right, so let's work out some problems. Write an equation of the line that is the perpendicular bisector of the line having endpoints 3, -1 and 3, 5. The use of the grid is optional, but we are going to use the grid. So I'm going to begin by plotting the points 3, -1, that's here, and 3, 5. That is 2, 3, 4, here. So what does it mean that they want the equation of the line that is the perpendicular bisector of the line segment? Well, first of all, equation of a line implies that we're going to have to give an equation when it's all said and done, right? We're not just going to graph something. We have to give some type of equation. What does it mean that they want the perpendicular bisector? Well, think, right? A perpendicular bisector must pass through the midpoint. So what's the midpoint of the segment that we have here? Well, we could draw a segment to make it easier to find. And from doing that, we can easily tell that the midpoint is right over here. So this is the midpoint. So we know the perpendicular bisector must pass through here. We know that the perpendicular bisector has to be perpendicular to the given segment. So if it has to pass through this point and it has to be perpendicular to the segment, I have to draw a line like this if I want to draw the perpendicular bisector. So this line that I just drew represents the perpendicular bisector, but we're not done yet because they want the equation of the perpendicular bisector. So what's the equation of the line here? It's y equals 2. Let's try another one. Write an equation of the line that is the perpendicular bisector of the line segment having endpoints 1, -2, and 5, 4. Use of the grid below is optional, but we're going to do it graphically. So I'm going to plot my 2 points. So I got 1, -2 here, and I got 5, 4 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One more. Where's my point? Am I at the wrong place? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right there. Okay, so again, what do we know? We know the perpendicular bisector must pass through the midpoint. So let's find that midpoint, shall we? So I like to just draw the segment here. And I need to get rid of this line here that I drew by accident. And I could tell that the midpoint is right over here. So I know the perpendicular bisector has to pass through here. And I know that it also has to be perpendicular to the given segment. So I'm going to use that to help me write the equation of the line. So, what would be the slope of the perpendicular bisector? I have to think a little bit. What's the slope of the original line? Well, let's see, it's 3 over 2. So how I got that, the slope of the original line, it goes up 1, 2, 3 over 2. What would be the slope of the perpendicular bisector? Well, we've been over this, right? We've talked about perpendicular lines before. The slope of the perpendicular bisector should be -2 over 3 because it has to be the negative reciprocal of the original. So my perpendicular bisector, if I were to draw it, I'm going to start from the midpoint because it has to pass through there, and I'm going to go down 2 over 3, down 2 over 3. And I'll do the same going backwards. And I'm going to get a line that looks like this. So that's the perpendicular bisector. I just drew it. But I'm asked to write the equation of it. So now the equations of lines, they are usually in the form of y equals mx plus b. I say usually because in our first example it was not in this form. So to write the equation of the perpendicular bisector, I need the slope, which I already have, and I also need b of the perpendicular bisector. B is over here. B is 3. So I'm going to use this to write the equation. So it's y equals -2 over 3 x plus 3. This is the equation of the perpendicular bisector. And you have to write the equation because that's what it's asking for. Here are some steps and guidelines that you can use to do this graphically, if you so wish to do it graphically. Now let's try to do the same problem we just worked out algebraically. So it says, write an equation of the line that is the perpendicular bisector of the line segment having endpoints 1, -2, and 5, 4. The use of the grid is optional. So this time we're not going to use a graph. We're going to do it algebraically. So it says write an equation. So that means that my answer should be in this form of y equals mx plus b. Usually it should be in that form. All right, now, in order for me to give the equation of the perpendicular bisector, I need the slope of the perpendicular bisector and I need the b of the perpendicular bisector. So I have to find those things. Okay, so shall we begin? We know that the perpendicular bisector has to pass through the midpoint. So I need to find the midpoint of these points here. So here's my midpoint formula. And I'm doing the midpoint of 1, -2 and 5, 4. So you're going to label. This is my x1. This is y1. This is x2. This is y2. So you plug in. And you should get 3, 1 for the midpoint, which should be popping up any second now. There it is. Okay, so I got the midpoint. All right, that's going to come in handy later when I need to find B. So now, I need to find the slope of the given segment, because that's going to help me figure out what the slope of the perpendicular bisector should be. So I could use the slope formula for that, and the slope of the given segment is 3 over 2. The slope of the perpendicular bisector is negative 2 over 3. So I got the slope of the perpendicular bisector. Now I need to find B. So the y-intercept of the perpendicular bisector, you have to plug in to y equals mx plus b, and you have to solve for b. So the x and the y, where is that going to come from? The x and the y is going to come from the midpoint, because the perpendicular bisector has to pass through the midpoint. So the x is 3, the y is 1, and the slope, or the m, is negative 2 over 3. Make sure you use the new slope, not the old one. So you're going to plug into this. You get 1 equals negative 2 over 3 times 3 plus b. And you're going to solve for b. So you get 1 equals 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. Negative 6 divided by 3 is negative 2. So you get negative 2 plus b. It's just multiply the numerators and divide the result by the denominator. You add 3 on both sides. And, excuse me, not add 3. I apologize. You're supposed to add 2 on both sides. Add 2 on both sides. These will cancel out. 1 plus 2 is 3. 3 equals b. So I got the b of the perpendicular bisector. It's 3. Now I could write the equation of it. So the equation of it is going to be y equals negative 2 over 3x plus 3. But you already knew that because we had done this already graphically. So let me just box my final answer. If you want some steps for doing this algebraically, I can give you some steps, some guidelines. Here they are. And let me see if I can somehow fit all this into the screen. Probably should use a smaller font. There it is. But it's just, even though I'm giving you these steps, I want you to try to use your use your intuition, right? If you're looking for the equation of the perpendicular bisector, well, use the definitions. You know that it has to pass through the midpoint, so you need to find the midpoint. You know that it's perpendicular, so you're going to have to find the slope of the original segment, so you could use that to get the slope of the perpendicular bisector. Then you got to find B, and so on and so forth. So you can just follow these guidelines that I have here, but they're really just based on intuition and a critical reading of the problem. I hope this video helps. Take care.